the Indiana Hoosiers are going to have to fight tooth and nail against this particular program if they want to win some major basketball recruits.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, my buddy Lance Dawe and I from Locked On Kentucky sat down and talked about some of the biggest recruits in the 2025 class, where Kentucky and your Indiana Hoosiers are in major competition, and how Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers are going to have to beat them if they want to get them.
Lance Dawe, Jacob Goins here, crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Hoosiers. Going to be talking a little Kentucky and Indiana recruiting. Here we got three prospects to dive into, as well as team previews for both of our squads. Two teams that are looking pretty new, considering their new additions through the transfer portal. Very excited to talk with you, Jacob, here today about all of these different topics. Before we kind of get into everything, just want to remind everybody, both of our teams are going to be playing, not this season, but next season. So I'm really hoping that we can both kind of put some competent products out on the floor so that we have something to look forward to.
Man, I'm telling you what, it's going to be so exciting when these two historic programs get back together on the hardwood like it's meant to be. I hate that it can't be this year just because I know how good our teams are going to be, but the rivalry will continue, and the rivalry in recruiting is heating up tremendously, and that's what we're here to talk about today is a couple of big-name players in the upcoming recruiting class that I think Kentucky and Indiana both feel really, really good about.
It's a shame that we weren't able to play this year. And I feel the same way about a team like St. John's, who Kentucky was going to play this year. They're going to play them next year as well. So a really fun non-con slate to look forward to. But this year, man, you got a lot of things going on the recruiting trail for both these teams. And considering where they're at, the ties, and just the fact that both of these schools really like to swing for the fences with all their prospects, there's a lot of crossover happening between these two programs when it comes to what's happening on the recruiting trail. And we've got three prospects that we want to talk about here today and kind of give our confidence meter, talk about how important maybe these guys are for the Wildcats and the Hoosiers. Let's start here with a player I have raved about on my show, and I'm sure you have as well. Braylon Mullins, a shooting guard out of Greenfield Central High School in Greenfield, Indiana, a 6'5", 180-pound prospect, top 25 guy according to 24/7 Sports, their raw player rating, and then a top 75 player according to their composite ratings. I remember when I first talked about Braylon on my show, before we kind of dived into the recruiting aspect of it, the news, I always like to give my audience kind of an idea as to what the player is about. I put in my notes, in my Google Docs, bro shoots. That is all I put. Normally I put a that's all I had for Braylon. And that is honestly, long and short of it, that's kind of my assessment. He is an excellent three-point shooter, and obviously when talking about Mark Pope and the way that Kentucky wants to do things, they're going to shoot threes, they're going to run around, and the immediate observation to make is like, hey, he's really good at doing what we want to do, and so it'd be really nice to get him kind of in your program here in a year or so. But Jacob, it looks like the Indiana Hoosiers are making a very serious push for what I consider to be one of Kentucky's most important prospects.
Yeah, it's a guy that the people in the Indiana recruiting circle, guys like myself, where we talk about this and cover this every single day, Mullins is near the top of our board. He is somebody that the Hoosiers have been on early and often, and I think that's what benefits Mike Woodson in this recruitment is, yes, he's an Indiana kid, but the Hoosiers were on him before a lot of other big name programs were. And this is somebody who has shot up the recruiting rankings in the past 12 months, really even the past 8 months, Lance. And that's what is, it's intriguing. And it's also a little frustrating on the Indiana side because we were on him early and then boom, all of a sudden here comes Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina. Like all the big programs are now like, they notice who Braylon Mullins is. And you mentioned that he's a shooter. He is a shooting guard, but his numbers are phenomenal. His ball handling skills are great. His Indiana elite team, the AAU team that he's been competing on over this summer, they were dominant, man. They were really good. And Mike Woodson and the Indiana coaching staff went and saw him time and time again. We feel good about it, but you know this in 2024 recruiting and beyond, it's not over until it's over. Anything can happen any given month, any given day, and unfortunately at this point, any given hour, things can change. But I'll say this, we feel really, really good about Braylon Mullins and how he could fit the offense moving forward here in Indiana. And I think we're selling him, hey, come be the future of Indiana basketball.
I talked with Jacob Polachek of Kentucky Sports Radio last week, kind of talking about where Kentucky is in his recruitment, and very similar sentiment to what you just shared as far as, his ties to the Hoosiers, just how important the Indiana is making this kid for their upcoming class. And as good as he would be in a Kentucky system, I really do think that the Hoosiers, I'm not saying that it's essentially theirs to lose, but like you said, anything can happen. But right now, it does feel like Indiana is the leader for this kid. Indiana was one of the first big time programs to offer him, I believe, in September of last year. But Jacob, you look at his upcoming visit list.
It's ridiculous.
It is absolutely insane. It starts August 1st here in just a couple of days, where he will go and visit the UConn Huskies. Then he will go to Michigan State. He'll go to Michigan. He'll go to North Carolina. He'll go to Indiana September 24th. He'll go to Tennessee in October. He'll go to Kentucky on October 25th. Later on this year, he released his top 10 just recently. He is considering Purdue, Indiana, Alabama, Michigan, Tennessee, North Carolina, Duke, UConn, Kentucky, and Kansas. That is an incredibly high-profile top 10, trimmed it down from the 32 offers that he has received. Man, to be able to cut it down to 10 and those be your 10 best programs that you're looking at, it's a very, very good situation that Mullins kind of finds himself in all of a sudden. And it like you said, to his credit, he has absolutely earned all of the attention he has gotten, just playing extremely well this summer. I do want to ask you here, Jacob, as we kind of look at this recruitment from both of our perspectives, let's do this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in Indiana basketball's ability to land Braylon Mullins as opposed to all of these other schools? Because I know that we currently believe the Hoosiers are kind of like in the race for it, and they are currently, in my opinion, one of, if not the biggest favorite to land him. But there are so many different other big name programs that are going to get him on campus before he makes the decision. So scale of 1 to 10, confidence meter for Braylon Mullins.
I'll say this about his top 10. Once he's done with his visits, I think Kentucky is the last one you mentioned, that he'll cut it down to his top 5. So 5 of those big name programs in college basketball will be dropped off of his list. Indiana squeezed right in there in the middle of that. My everydayers know I'm not a huge fan of where we fall in the official visit list and tier list, but it is what it is. And he'll be here with 2 of his other AAU teammates. I'm going to put it on a 7. I put it on a 7 because I feel really good about it. I think Indiana's in a good spot, but that leaves me a little wiggle room with anything can happen. And again, in today's world, that doesn't just mean you like the coach a lot or, oh, you really just want to be on this campus. We know what we're talking about here, and it's a factor, and everybody plays that way, and it is what it is. So I'll put it on a 7. Right now, Lance, on Braylon Mullins, which of the guys we're going to talk about here today, he's probably up near the list of my confidence level and the importance level for Indiana basketball in terms of recruiting.
I think that's a very fair place to put it. And look, I would have wanted to lean higher if Braylon was not, in my estimation, leaning so heavily towards maybe some other programs, especially Indiana. I'm going to put my confidence in Kentucky potentially landing Mullins at a 4. And I think that I'm not putting it lower than that because of the fact that Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken, gets his last visit.
Yep.
There are so many different things that can happen over the coming months that could potentially pull him into committing to the Cats or elsewhere. I still think Kentucky, although they may not be the favorite, they're definitely still in this race. Anything could happen. I'm going to put it at a 4 in terms of importance for what Kentucky wants to do. They need to be able to establish themselves through not the transfer portal, but through recruiting by getting guys exactly like this that can stay in your program for a few years. Obviously, you and I both really enjoy college basketball. I think something that a team like UConn has perfected is the ability to bring in high-end talent and then keep them in the program for more than 1 year. It's something that Coach Cal in Kentucky has consistently failed to do because their philosophy is bringing in one-and-done talents that can kind of get in, get out, make your program good year after year. It's kind of a revolving door, at least in years past, but something that UConn has done is gotten guys that are rated 4 stars, that are somewhere hovering in that top 100, that may have some NBA upside, but you don't really get to see it until year 3 when all of a sudden, hey, we're kind of adding these guys next man up style. So I think Mullins would be, in my estimation, one of the more important pieces in terms of the ability to kind of plug him into your system and see him thrive immediately, to get the opportunity to legitimately develop him so that you have him for multiple seasons and make him a legitimate contributor that's more experienced, more physical. I think people underestimate the value of having somebody in college for multiple years, because sometimes with these freshmen, and we saw it last year with Kentucky, they lack some physicality, and frankly, they just lack weight. They just lack weight. And so if you don't have guys on the interior or on the wing like Mullins who aren't able to kind of build that over time, they're going to struggle defensively. And so I would put, honestly, Mullins, as far as importance, I'd put it at a 7. I'd put it at a 7 or an 8 for the Kentucky Wildcats. I think that they should really bear down and continue to pursue guys like him, as well as Mullins himself.
Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Let's continue here to talk about Kentucky's and Indiana's prospects that we're really excited about. The second player here, and we had a great debate as to how to pronounce his last name. I'm just going to chuck it out there.
Good luck to you, my friend. Good luck.
If I am slandered by the internet today, which I guarantee you, I've got like 3 commenters that know my grammatical shortcomings, and they make it clear as often as they can, and I love them and I appreciate them for that because it keeps me on my toes. But
those are true everydayers. That's what we call those here at Locked On.
They are true everydayers, the ones that really make sure to talk to me about my grammar. But I'm not even kidding. Eric Ryby, that's what I'm going to go with. That's what I'm going to roll with. If you have thoughts on this name, you can leave it in the comments below. Eric Ryby, though, a very fun center prospect, 7 foot, 235-pound player out of the Bullis School in Potomac, Maryland. Top 40 player according to the 24/7 Sports composite ratings. Top 50 player according to the Raw 247 Sports rating. Number 4 center in the 2025 class. Number 1 player in the state of Maryland. Currently crystal balled to the Creighton Blue Jays, who, when you watch this kid play and you see what Creighton has done over the last several years with some of their big men, specifically Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's been there for 35 years, they look like a really good destination. I think I said this when I talked about Ryby. I'm like, hey, this actually looks like a pretty good fit at Creighton. I'm not going to lie, just because of how he operates. So tell me kind of what you've seen out of Eric Ryby as a prospect and where Indiana kind of stands with him.
Well, Indiana this guy kind of came out of nowhere, not because he hasn't been a high level talent, but Indiana's interest in him, I think, became a very late coming thing. And look, the Indiana and Kentucky are in that group of programs historically that they've had some really dominant centers and tall centers at that. And look at what Indiana's done here in recent years. We just put a guy in the NBA who is a top 15 pick in Khalil Ware, who was a 7-footer. We've got Umar Ballo coming in this year, who's a 7-footer. And guess what? This guy is a 7-footer. So he would continue what I hope is a starting trend of under Mike Woodson, just bringing in dominant 7-footers, making them even better, and putting them into the NBA. And you watch this guy compete, and he just knows how to play the game. Yes, being tall helps, Lance. You and I don't know that, but being tall helps. And when you bring him in and a guy who has such good basketball IQ, knows how to move without the basketball, even for a big man, that's what makes him so good. And whether it's with Mark Pope at Kentucky, whether it would be Mike Woodson at Indiana, or some of the other programs, I mean, Oregon's in there, UConn, a team you just raved about, is on his list as well. Like, this is someone who is going to make a program much, much better. And something else that I like about him is when you look at his list, you've got a school like Harvard in there who has come out of nowhere. And I believe it's because Ribey is one of those guys who is also interested in the academic side, which I've said this on my show, where that is a lost trait, man. That's a lost trait of a lot of players now who are not just intrigued by the athletic side, but they want to go get a good education. And I don't know what this guy wants to do for his career, but I'm just saying Harvard's on his list, and that's pretty impressive for what is considered a top 30, top 40 player. So I think he'd fit Indiana's system quite well. In terms of where we stand right now, we're making moves. We're in contact with him. I just fear, Lance, that Indiana got involved a little too late on this one. There's still time to make up ground, but that's where I stand in terms of how that recruitment has gone. He'd be a perfect fit. I'm not worried about that at all. But where we are in the importance factor in Ribey's kind of recruiting, I don't know. I fear we got involved a little too late for him. I'm curious where Kentucky stands and kind of your feelings on how Mark Pope has done in this quick recruitment of this guy.
Well, that's what I was about to say is, as far as Kentucky goes, man, I don't necessarily feel a certain way, one way or another, just because of how things are currently set up. Kentucky did make the final cut alongside Indiana. You look at the list, like you said, Kentucky, Creighton, Harvard, Indiana, Kansas, North Carolina, like you said, Oregon, Ohio State's in there. Stanford is in there. You talk about schools with really good academics.
There's another one. Yep.
UConn, West Virginia, a little bit of a drop-off academically there towards the end. But he has only visited so far, if I'm not mistaken, according to reports that came out in just a couple of weeks ago, actually, he's only visited Creighton and Harvard so far. So I really do think that there's a lot that can unfold here, similar to Braylon. There are things that can happen with this kid's recruitment that could dramatically change where he could end up. There's just a lot of time. And I think, frankly, a lot of ground that could be made up by either Kentucky or Indiana if they're lagging behind. Funny to say, if they're lagging behind a team like Harvard, which is just really, really weird to think about. But this is what is the big thing for me with Ribey. And it's kind of the same thing with Mullins. And you're going to hear me talk about the system and three-point shooting and scoring and how Kentucky's going to prioritize that and yada, 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 yada. This kid, a lefty at 7 feet tall, like you said, is very, very smart. The way he operates without the basketball in his hands, off ball on the offensive side of the floor, is really fun to see. But he is an aggressive offensive player when it comes to shooting. He is not afraid in pick and pop situations to, oh, you're smaller than me. Doesn't matter if you're right up on me. I'm taking the shot and I'm hitting it. He is an incredibly fun player to watch on the offensive side of the ball. And when it comes to what Mark Pope likes to do with his centers as far as utilization goes, I think this is a match made in heaven. You look at some of the players that Mark Pope had at BYU. Take Ali Khalifa from last year, for instance. Ali Khalifa, I believe, had a 31%, like a 28% assist rate, which is just insanely high. He was second in the Big 12 last year in assist rate. And that was right there with like LJ Cryer from Baylor and like Jamal Shed of Houston, who are like two of the best guards in the country. Oh, and then there's like 6'9", 240-pound Ali Khalifa, a player from Egypt who just frankly was good, but didn't have a ton of athleticism, just out there at the perimeter, just throwing dimes like every time down the floor.
Yeah.
You want to, if you're Pope, utilize your centers in a variety of ways that are not just including post-ups, rebounding, and rim protection. You want them to shoot threes. You want them to get involved in the passing game. You want them to become focal points of the offense. And Ryby, when talking about his relationship with Pope, he said he likes how he contacts me. He's a big man, former big man, so he knows how I think and feel on and off the court. They see me as a shooter in their system. They want me to take early threes, play inside out, handoffs, making passes, all that good stuff. I mean, as far as just the things that are being said, it makes perfect sense why these two would kind of be interested in each other. Now, again, I will say there's a lot of different really good teams in here that I think can provide similar things for Ryby in the future. But man, as far as confidence meter, put it at a calm 5. I've got no feeling one way or another for me.
That's kind of where I'm at with Indiana too. I'm just, it could happen, but maybe don't hang your hat on it type of thing, right? It's just kind of middle ground, but it's a good transition to the last guy that we want to talk about. And for me, where I feel a lot more confident on this guy, and I have a feeling that you do too, with Malachi Moreno, another center that everybody is on this guy. He's only 6'11", Lance, so he's on the shorter side, right? I mean, he's 6'11" compared to Ryby. I mean, he's just an ant. I mean, 6'11", whatever, 230 pounds, but he's from the Bluegrass State. He's from Kentucky, and Mark Pope, and I know the Cats have been on him early and often, and this isn't a situation where Indiana's trying to come down and take a kid from the state of Kentucky. And we were talking about him before the show, right? Kentucky, Arkansas, Indiana, North Carolina, Ohio State, you name them. I mean, the biggest and best players go to the biggest and best programs, and that's what is on him right now. And he would fit. It's the same spiel that we've given for Kentucky and Indiana. He's a 6'11" center that when he wants to and where he's called on, he will step out and shoot threes, and he can facilitate the offense in the half court or in transition if he's able to get a block or a steal or whatever the case may be. Moreno can be that guy too, which it's funny that Indiana and Kentucky are heated rivals over history, but it's similar on how their programs are setting up to be run with new coach Mark Pope and still early coach, I'm not going to say young, but early coach Mike Woodson during his Indiana tenure, how it fits a guy like Malachi Moreno so well for both programs.
If you look at On3 right now and you look at their recruiting prediction machine, which is not always extremely accurate, I think it does tend to lend itself to the team that the players most recently taken a visit with. But Kentucky currently at the top with a 79% chance to land this kid. Indiana right there behind Kentucky. Forget the percentages, just focus on the fact that Kentucky and Indiana are currently the two favorites to land Malachi Moreno. And that's kind of where we sit. This may be the biggest prospect that we talk about today as far as contention between these two schools. This is the guy I think that I'm looking at here and saying, okay, this is outside of Mullins. I think he is the one that both of these programs would very much so like to have and are at the top of this list. When breaking down this guy's game a few weeks ago, I put in my notes that Moreno is kind of a jack of all trades when you watch him. Again, not the tallest player, not insanely athletic, not the fastest, but he can do everything at a pretty solid to elite level. He's a really good rebounder. He's a good defender. He scores well at the rim. He's primarily a post-up player more than anything, and he's got some very solid post moves and just kind of works and weaves his way around the basket in a way that reminds me of an SEC player that I've talked about before on the show, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on in just a second. I think that On3 hit the nail on the head whenever talking about this kid's development. He's got a lot that translates to college well, like immediately. Just the ability to kind of do everything fundamentally at a high level, but he's still got room to improve. And that's kind of where I want to take this for just a second and see if you agree with me. There's a center, All-American center currently in this conference that I think plays the game in a very similar manner to Moreno. And just as far as projecting out what he could be, I think there could be a similar trajectory here. Auburn's Janai Broome, who started off his career at Morehead State, really solid player, didn't shoot threes. He was a good rebounder. He was a good passer. He was a good rim scorer, and he was a really good rim defender. And that's kind of what brought him into Auburn. Now, he was raw. He was still a sophomore. He struggled against Auburn's Walker Kessler. Actually, they both played off against each other in a season opener, if I'm not mistaken.
Who's in the NBA now?
Who's a starting center in the NBA and one of the best defenders already in the NBA in Kessler. But he comes into Auburn, and they kind of started adding things onto his game. They added the outside shot. They added the ability to kind of get more involved in the passing game. His assist rate's gone up. Everything about Moreno screams, potential All-American development, especially at a place like Kentucky, is going to encourage him to explore those other aspects of the game. They're going to want to him. They're going to rely on him growing those aspects of being able to pass, being able to step out on the perimeter, and not just be a threat to throw the ball around, but be able to be a threat to throw the ball in the hole. This looks like, to me, a very high-end prospect that has a lot of upside for either of our schools.
Yeah, I like the Janai Broome comparison. Broome is somebody that when he was in the portal, like schools went after him, but I don't feel like a ton just jumped on him immediately. And Bruce Pearl and Auburn just snuck up and grabbed him and literally have made him into an All-American. And you go and watch some of his film, and yes, Broome is I think a little on the undersized category, but he plays really, really well with his feet, and he does step out and shoot when the Tigers ask him to. And if you're looking for a comparison for Moreno, then yeah, I think Janai Broome is it. Somebody that is going to be playing or at least competing to get to the NBA, and Moreno could be that guy. Whether it's Kentucky or whether it's Indiana, both of these programs are going to be run to where they put guys like him in the league. Again, Indiana just did it a year ago with Khalil Ware. I think they can do it again with Umar Ballo, and they could do it again whether it's Ryby or Moreno or whoever else. There's other guys like a Chris Senac of the world that if Indiana somehow lands them, yeah, the system's going to benefit them really well. So look, I hope one of us gets him because I think Moreno is going to be a fantastic player, but I like that comparison to Janai Broome. I think that's a very well thought out comparison that many people up for the Big Ten folks may not know of a whole lot, but go check him out because the guy's a great player, and I think Malachi Moreno could become that at the next level.
Give me a confidence meter and how important he could be for your program.
And in terms of how important he could be, I'm putting him at like a 7 or an 8. I mean, he's up there as one of the go-to guys just because I don't know what our size is going to look like moving forward here at Indiana. Confidence meter, I'm going to put it at a 6, maybe 5.5. I don't feel good about the 6, maybe 5.5. We're in it. We're absolutely in it, but there's work to do. There's no doubt. There is work to do in Bloomington to get Malachi Moreno, but it's not over, and we're going to fight Kentucky till the very end of it, I promise.
Give me 7.5 for the confidence of Kentucky landing him. Give me a 9 for importance.
I like it.
This has been, since I started watching, my top guy for Kentucky to kind of build on with Mark Pope because, again, he doesn't shoot the ball right now a ton, but I see the potential. I see what Mark Pope is going after. If you can get somebody like him on campus and you can prove concept with this type of guy, you can go out and get any recruit that you want. And I think also, I'll just say this, when you look at, like you said earlier, a program like Indiana, who has had so many great centers over the years, you could definitely see him in a Hoosier jersey at some point. Absolutely. I think you would fit in perfectly at either of our programs.
I agree. 100%. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs are basically over, we've just got fewer games, and the sports just aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. It can be about baseball. It can be about the college football season that's right around the corner. Or if you've got a prediction for college basketball, you can go ahead and get that into on FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
So to kind of wrap up the show here, I know we've run long on a couple of different prospects. That is my fault. I apologize.
We typically do when we get together. That's typically how these shows go. Every
time we talk, it's the same thing whenever we do radio. It's just sometimes you look up and 35 minutes have passed and it's just like, oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, so we wanted to kind of talk about team previews, just kind of get an idea for our opposing audience, obviously as huge college basketball guys and our audiences as well, just kind of educate the people on what's going down in the landscape. And I think Indiana, you can break this down for me here, Jacob, is a team on the come up, especially with the talent that they've added through the portal. This is a good Big Ten team, and they will be expected to compete and, dare I say, actually make the NCAA tournament, actually do some things. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, God forbid we make the NCAA tournament in Indiana. It's kind of a crazy standard we've got over here in Bloomington. But missing the tournament last year was not cool, man. Not cool, not acceptable. And Indiana fans were very unhappy about it. And the problem was you could see it coming down the pipe. And not to get super deep here again, I know we're shorter on time. But what you can expect this year from Indiana. A completely new roster. There's a couple of returning guys that are very important. Malik Renew is back as your power forward. Mackenzie Mbako, I think, is going to be one of the most electrifying players in the Big Ten. The sophomore leap is going to happen with this guy. I'm telling you, it's going to be there. But then, other than Trey Galloway, who is such a wild card, he had a great season 2 years ago, shot over 42% from three. Last year, coming off of injury, was just not who he needed to be. Everybody else is brand new. New guards out of the portal, new 7-foot center out of the portal, new shooters that'll be on the bench out of the portal as well. I think we brought in the #1 transfer portal class this offseason, and it's going to be a completely different looking team. The biggest question, can Mike Woodson adjust? Can Mike Woodson coach? Can he call the right plays and the right sets to his team's strengths? A team that was abysmal shooting from three-point land last year, could not defend the three-point last year. And Lance, for whatever reason, they refused to run in transition. They'd get a steal, 3-on-1, slow it down. We'll wait for everybody to get back. And then they'd take 20 seconds and couldn't get off a shot anyway. And so I hope that those things change. And if they do, watch out for the Hoosiers. We're making the tournament this year. I'm putting a JG guarantee on it. We're making the tournament. I don't know what seed. I think around 4 or 5 is a good spot for us right now. And we'll compete in what is an expanded Big Ten. Reminder, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC are now in the Big Ten. I know it's bigger than the SEC is right now, but don't worry. You guys will catch up on that number. I have a feeling.
This is less for the audience and more for just my personal gain here. I'm looking at the Big Ten standings from last year. Indiana finished 10-10 right there in the middle of the pack with Michigan State and Iowa. Can you kind of tell me, obviously you just told me the seed, can you kind of give me an idea as to where in the Big Ten pecking order you feel like it is fair for the Hoosiers this year? Because you got some really good teams that you're going to be fighting against.
Yeah, I mean, I think top 5 is where it has to be. I really do. I think top 5 is the expectation. I think Ohio State's going to be a really good team. I think Michigan is a very slept-on team. I think Purdue is always going to be Purdue. I think they'll take a step back this season. But, don't sleep on those 4 newcomers out of the West. And if Michigan State can get back to what they're supposed to be, cool. I think Rutgers is a sleeper in this conference. I mean, there's just so many good teams, Lance, but how many great teams will be out of the Big Ten? That's going to be the big question. If that happens and you see some teams really separate themselves, watch out because it's going to be a lot of fun. But I expect top 5 for the Hoosiers in the Big Ten this season.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of turmoil. That's why I wanted to ask that, because it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. Like 2 of the worst teams in the conference last year in Rutgers and Michigan. I got good recruiting classes. I got good transfer portal guys in. Ace Bailey and then Harper over at Rutgers. That's going to be a fun duo, man. The Big Ten hoops is a good time. for sure. But so we've got Indiana basketball. We've got them on the rise this year. Best of luck to you guys until we face off. But just give you a brief update on the Kentucky Wildcats for any Hoosier fans out there, man. This is every single player from last year is gone. Forget what you saw with Coach Cal and the team from a season ago. This is a completely new team with Mark Pope at the helm, and he is going to bring a completely different philosophy and style of play to the Wildcats. There's been a lot of disgruntled conversation about how Coach Cal and his staff have run the offense in years past. I have been one of those people that has complained a ton about how he kind of utilizes different guys. Some of those guys are Arkansas. Best of luck to them. According to reports that came out earlier this week, they're not going to be allowed to shoot threes. Okay. Good for them. I hope they implement that philosophy when they come to Rupp, but that's another story. This is a completely new roster that knows how to do one thing extremely well, and that's shoot the three. Kentucky brought in, I think, 7 or 8 different players that shot, I think, 37% or better from beyond the arc. Several players in that 40% range. They brought in Kobe Brea from Dayton, who statistically was the best catch and shoot guy in college basketball last year. And then they brought in Kerr Carissa to run point alongside Lamont Butler, who hit that shot for San Diego State to get them to the national championship a couple of years ago. Kerr Carissa, who started his career at Arizona, fun fact, he was the second best catch and shoot player in the country last year. And that's not what he's known for. He's known for kind of being crazy out on the court with his passes that can be erratic at times, but still very fun. Jackson Robinson led the team BYU in scoring a season ago off the bench. He's going to be on this Kentucky squad. I think Robinson, Amari Williams at center, who was a 3-time conference defensive player of the year at Drexel, Williams, Robinson, and then the backcourt of Brea, Butler, and Carissa are going to be extremely important to this team's success. And I mentioned those several guys there, Jacob, because you can really go down a list here. I mean, it is a very solid 1-2 when you look at the 5 starting and you look at the 5 players off the bench. I don't think you're going to see a star player on this roster outside of maybe Robinson, who has, according to reports, been lighting it up in practice. I'm excited to see his final year back in the SEC. Started his career at Arkansas and Texas A&M. But it's going to be an extremely balanced rotation. It's going to be the deepest team Kentucky fans have seen in a hot minute. It's going to be the best shooting team Kentucky has seen in a hot minute. The coaching staff has continued to say over and over and over again, hey, we're going to shoot 35 threes a game. That's our goal. We averaged 32 last year at BYU. We want to shoot 35. I'll leave you on this, Jacob. If Kentucky shoots 35 threes a game and their players hit at the numbers that they hit a season ago, even if they take like a 1 or 2% step back, they will break Villanova's record for most threes made in a season pretty comfortably. And we know what those Villanova teams did in the 2017-2018 seasons. Those were some really good ball clubs. If Kentucky can figure out how to put the ball in the hole at the rate that they want to, they're going to win some games. At least I hope they will. Defense, I think, is going to be much improved. If they can kind of keep those two things going, the hot offense from last year, and you can kind of get some better defense in, man, is this team going to be super fun. It's a shame that so many of these guys are graduating, Jacob, because they're not going to be able to see the Hoosiers next season. But I'm very, very excited the direction for both of these programs. I'm super excited about this crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Hoosiers. Jacob, kind of final thoughts here as we wade closer and closer to the college basketball season. Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
It can't get here soon enough, man. I mean, we got football right around the corner. I know you're going to have football coverage for Kentucky. I'll have football coverage for Indiana. But, man, when basketball season gets here, it's on. And these two teams are going to be good. And if there is a God, we will meet in the NCAA tournament. Somehow, some way, once again, we'll make it happen because these two teams are destined to play on the hardwood. I'm just telling you like it is. It's got to happen. And I cannot wait for next year when it happens in the regular season.
It will be beautiful. All right. That is our crossover edition of Locked On Kentucky and Locked On Hoosiers. For fans of Locked On UK, please make sure to go give Jacob a follow on Twitter at Goins2Jacob and check out the Locked On Hoosiers Podcast. And hey, if you are listening and you're an Indiana fan, you want to learn about things going on in the realm of college basketball, we talk it quite a bit over here as well. It's a super fun thing to kind of dive into. I pray for Jacob as he covers Indiana football. I know that is just probably one of the most painful experiences in the world. Frankly, it is.
Got to be better this year. Got to be better this year. I promise.
My sources tell
the
me
real deal.
that it will be improved. But to what degree? That is the question that we must find out. Jacob, really appreciate you hopping on with me.
Yeah, thanks so much, man.